Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We just marked the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution. Connecticut has some interesting ties to it. With me now to discuss the Constitution state's connection to the Revolutionary War, Gillie Johnson, museum educator with the Wethersfield Historical Society. Gillie, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, share with me a little about the Wethersfield Historical Society. Who are you? What do you all do?
So the Wethersfield Historical Society preserves and promotes Wethersfield's history. It was founded back in the 1930s, so
Wow.
We are over 90 years old. And it was originally founded because Wethersfield celebrated in 1934 its 300th anniversary. So Wethersfield is one of the oldest towns in Connecticut. And so the Historical Society was put together to celebrate the town's big 300th birthday. And we've held on since then. And nowadays we do field trips for school children, and we have a museum, which is free to visit.
Amazing. I love it. So as you said, one of the oldest towns, so not just history in Connecticut, but even more history in Wethersfield.
Yes.
So as we said, we're marking the 250th anniversary this weekend of the start of the American Revolution, specifically the battles of Lexington and Concord, which kicked off the war. Can you tell us a little bit about the start of the war and, why this is such an important anniversary?
Yeah, so the Revolutionary War was a fight for independence from England, and the Constitution that was created at the end of the war is still around today, 250, over 200 years later. And yeah, came about, the battles of Lexington and Concord, thanks to many years of tension that had been building up between Great Britain and its American colonies, basically after the French and Indian War of 1763. So you had a 12-year time period where tension is building between the colonies and Great Britain, which eventually explodes in April 19th, 1775.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they think of the start of the war, they think of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride and
Yes.
Massachusetts and Boston. But, we know Connecticut played a significant role as well in the Revolution. Can you share with us a little bit about what that role was, how our state was involved in this?
Connecticut was involved in many ways. It was involved right from the start. In 1765, Great Britain passed the Stamp Act, which you may have learned about in school. This was a tax on paper products, and it was not very popular here in Connecticut or across the other colonies. And in Connecticut, Jared Ingersoll was responsible for collecting that tax. And he was going to meet with the General Assembly in Hartford to discuss what they were going to do about this new tax. But before he could get to Hartford, he was stopped in Wethersfield by a crowd he estimated of about 500 people. And that crowd wanted him to resign. And when he asked them what would happen to him if he did not resign, they said, "Your fate."
Oh, no.
Yep, they would kill him. So Jared Ingersoll stalled for a few hours, hoping someone from Hartford would come save him, but they didn't. And so at that point, he decided, the cause is not worth dying for. And so he ends up resigning. And so because of this resistance to the Stamp Act here in Connecticut and other colonies, that act eventually gets repealed by Parliament. So you can say some of the earliest resistance to Great Britain started here in Connecticut with that, however you want to put
some
it,
of those,
capture of
some of
Jared
those
Ingersoll.
rumblings of resistance. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then when we look at, the extent of the war as it went on, Connecticut was kind of marked the provision state, right? Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so Connecticut was known as the provision state because Connecticut provided a ton of provisions, goods that the Army needed, like clothes, like ammunition, food. all of these things. An army can't fight without food.
Right.
So Connecticut played a crucial role in providing those goods.
And, as people are watching this, we were saying April 19th is that day, which would be yesterday, but you were saying that April 20th is significant for Wethersfield as well, right?
Yes, that's the day that Wethersfield got the news that the battles of Lexington and Concord had taken place. A guy named Isaac Sheldon came to Wethersfield bearing a letter saying that these battles had happened. But believe it or not, the people at the time did not believe the letter.
Oh,
they
wow.
thought that it was fake. And it wasn't until the next day, April 21st, when another guy confirmed the news that they actually believed that there was a war going on.
So there you go. The citizens of Wethersfield were smart. They were getting multiple sources.
Exactly.
And I know the Wethersfield Historical Society commemorated this anniversary with some events, a special Revolutionary War themed tour of the ancient burying ground and a Revolutionary tour of Wethersfield. Why those two events to mark this anniversary?
We felt like this was a very important date in our nation's history because, we became a nation because we won the Revolutionary War. And so we wanted to do some events to teach about the history of this event and the role that Wethersfield, ordinary people from Wethersfield, played in the important events that shaped our history.
And can you share with us, any of those facts, if you have any stories about some of the roles ordinary people from Wethersfield played?
Yeah, so ordinary people served as soldiers in the Army. There was also Benjamin Talmadge, who is one of my favorite figures from Wethersfield. He was a teacher before the war, and he eventually is made a lieutenant in the Army.
Oh, wow.
And I love this story. Before he agreed to go to New York, he needed some shirts. So he called a meeting of the patriotic women of Wethersfield because he didn't have the shirts he needed and he wanted their help. And so one of the ladies at the meeting says, well, my brother has all this extra linen that he doesn't need, so we'll get him to give the linen. And if he doesn't, we'll advertise in the newspaper that he's an enemy to the nation and tell everyone to stop doing business with him. So because of ordinary women, Benjamin Talmadge got his shirts that he needed to fight in the war.
That's a pretty intense way to convince someone to give over their extra linen.
Yeah, the lady was ratting out her brother.
Absolutely. So there's so many of these specific stories, and for you working as a museum educator, what does it mean to be able to share this? And especially as we look at, you said, it's such a big anniversary like this. I think people are thinking about, next year, 2026 with the 250th anniversary, of the end of the war. But this is really the start. This is the start of America. How important is it for you to be able to share these stories with people who might not know them?
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to share these stories because, as you said, they're not known. And I think they're great stories and they can be inspiring to people today, I think, as well, if not amusing, too.
Yeah, entertaining, but also, you said inspiring. Beyond this anniversary, as we're heading, and we're in spring, as we're heading into the summer months, you mentioned some field trips and some of the things that the Historical Society and the museum put on. Are there any other upcoming events that you'll be hosting that you want people to know about?
So we were recently awarded a museum makeover grant by Conservation Connection. And that grant is going to allow us to put together a new exhibit called Wethersfield's Forgotten Patriots, in which we will be sharing the story of some of Wethersfield's Black patriots. We've discovered like 15 Black men from Wethersfield who fought in the Revolutionary War. And their stories have not really been told in the past. So we're super excited to share these stories in that upcoming exhibit. And we're hoping to have touchable artifacts that, reproductions, of course, that people can interact with. to help bring these stories to life. Because it's one thing to read or hear a story, it's another thing to be able to touch stuff.
Yeah.
That
Is that something that you've been able to have before, those reproductions as interactive artifacts for people?
this is going to be new for this exhibit.
Wow.
And that's why we were excited to get the grant, because the grant is what's going to allow us to put together these objects.
Fantastic. Anything else, any other events coming up besides this exhibit? Or is there, anything you want people to know if they want more information or are interested in visiting?
Yeah, so if they want more information, they can email us at society@wethersfieldhistory.org, or they can call us at 860-529-7656, or visit us at 150 Main Street, Wethersfield, and we're happy to answer any questions that we get in person, via email, over the phone, you name it.
Well,
And
yeah, Gillie, thank you so much for checking in with us. We really appreciate you sharing a little bit of insight and history with us on this important anniversary.
yeah, do you mind if I add two more
No,
things?
go for it.
So Benjamin Talmadge, who I mentioned earlier, would become in charge of the Culper Ring, which was the most successful spy ring during the American Revolution.
Wow.
So I think it's pretty cool that we have a head of a spy ring here from Wethersfield.
Yes.
And then another fun fact is Wethersfield is home to Silas Deane, who was an American diplomat during the American Revolution, went to France, worked alongside Ben Franklin. And part of the reason we don't hear so much about him today, if you don't live in Wethersfield, that is because he was badmouthed by Arthur Lee of the Lees of Old Virginia, who did not like Silas Deane or Ben Franklin, and spread a whole bunch of lies about Silas Deane.
Yep. Yep. Well, Gillie, thank you so much again. We really appreciate this little peek into the past.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, that does it for us now here on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 and streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.